I want to know, why has it taken so long for him to address this issue? Now he's coming out with some, new plans and policies and signing new legislation that's making it more challenging for thieves, to steal cars. It's upping the, penalties and the prosecution and all of that. Well, why are we doing that now? He's coming out now looking like the hero, like, look what we're doing to correct car theft. Yes, but he didn't just get sworn into office. He's been in office for years and years at this point. So why is he only now addressing the car theft? Why? Why is that?
From Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak, this is the Automotive ADHD Show with Matt West.
And here we are, rocking it on the Automotive ADHD Show. You're probably glad that I am not speaking Japanese on the show now, that it's just if you're wondering, I've spent the past week and a half in Japan, and I am going to regale you with the tales of my trip to the land of the rising sun. Also, the land of the K car. Yes, we're going to talk about K cars and how another state may be adding them to the list of cars that are legal on the roads. We're going to get to that. We're also going to talk about something a friend of mine brought up that has been bugging me for a while. In fact, it's been bugging me for a long time. You could say it really grinds my gears. It really does. And we're gonna air that grievance. We're gonna talk about it, and it's something, by the way, that frankly is just outright dangerous. So we're gonna discuss that and more on this week's edition of the show, the Return to the United States edition of the show. Back to the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I will tell you a little bit more about my trip to Japan, and we'll get into some of the fun details, some of the things I was doing there. I was on a super secret mission, in fact. And what it is, I can't tell you yet, but you'll have to stick around. I'll tell you why I was in Japan. Anyway, so I do want to thank Jim Miller, just a guy, for keeping the seat warm for me and guest hosting on the show while I was gone. And I don't really know what he talked about. I couldn't listen to the radio while I was in Japan. I could listen to Japanese radio, but I couldn't listen to AM 1460 and FM 101.1 The Answer, 100.7 The Word, or 91.7 KLZR. I couldn't listen to any of those because, unfortunately, the signals don't, they don't cross the ocean. They don't. So, but granted, you can keep up with what Jim did on the podcast. In fact, just because I missed it on the radio doesn't mean that, and if you did too, it doesn't mean that you missed the show. I'm going to go back. I'm actually going to go back and listen to my own podcast. Well, of Jim, but the podcast of my own show. I got to figure out what he talked about because he may have been out for some revenge, in fact, because while I was in Japan, he posted a video, or rather I posted a video of something I saw that made me think of Jim just a little bit. I was walking through rural Japan, and I really got off of the beaten path, that's to say for sure. But I was walking through rural Japan, and I saw a Lexus LC400 that was, what's the nice way to put it? It was returning to Mother Earth. The Earth was taking it back. It was sitting in this guy's yard. And yes, you might think Japan is perfectly clean and pristine, and much of it is, but there are occasionally weird car nuts out there, just like there are here. I'm one of them, but there are some weird car nuts out there that you will see nice house with like 15 cars and like they're all rotting into the ground. That does happen. Not a lot, admittedly, not a lot, but this was there. And I posted this video on social media, and I said offhandedly something about the owner of this car being Jim Miller's Japanese cousin. So anyway, lesson learned. If you are even jokingly going to give your friends some crap about their cars, do it after they finish guest hosting your radio show while you're gone in another country and you can't listen to it live. Yeah, do it after that. That's the lesson to be learned here. So anyway, if you want to hear what Jim talked about, as do I, in fact, you're going to need to tune into the podcast, which is available on, well, wherever fine shows and this one are downloaded. That's on Spotify. It's also on video on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and more. Check it out there, and you will be hearing the podcast for the first time, as I am also going to be hearing the podcast for the first time. Anyway, so before we get into more discussion about Japan and some of the other things I want to talk about, did you see this? This is exciting news, especially if you are someone like me. Hopefully you are not someone like me, because that means you have a crippling hobby. I say a crippling hobby, financially crippling hobby, that you feel compelled to spend more money on, even though the cars don't run. By the way, I sold 2 cars. Yeah. Probably like, wow. Oh yeah, 2 cars. Okay, great. Yeah, that's a lot for me, okay? All right? That is a lot for me, because I have a problem. I definitely have a problem. I'm really good at buying cars. I am awesome at buying cars. If you want car buying advice, whether that's a new car, I've bought new cars, whether that's a used car from a dealership or any place like that, I've done that too. Or you want to go the route of Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, I've done that. You want to go to a dealer auction and buy a car at auction, I've done that too. I have bought a lot of cars. I've sold a fraction of the ones that I've bought. And the fraction of those ones that I've sold have also been for a fraction of the price that I originally paid for them. So look, don't be me. I'm bad. I buy cars. I'm terrible at selling cars. I did a rant the other week about how frustrating it's been lately to sell cars on Facebook Marketplace. I feel like the quality of buyer, yes, the quality of buyer's never been that high on Facebook Marketplace. I mean, I get it. Yes, it's Facebook Marketplace. It's the new Craigslist, right? But I feel like things have taken a turn downward. Even from the low bar they were at, they have somehow gotten lower. So if you want to hear my discussion on that, check that out on the podcast from a couple of weeks ago. That was a fun show, by the way. I started with that. Then we had Tommy Bristol, the R32 Skyline owner, who made some news headlines after his car got stolen and he tracked it down. I had him back on the show because there was a really tremendous update on that story, and that you got to hear that. There's a really good resolution to the story now. We also had Wesley Kagan on the third half of that show, talking about his poor financial choices. He does those too. Anyway, all of this to say, if you're like me and you're better at buying cars than you are at selling them, and you buy a lot of them, U-Haul has introduced a new toy hauler. Yes, this is really exciting. It is so if you are a person who is in the throes of an automotive addiction like I am, you have undoubtedly rented a U-Haul trailer. In fact, I was renting U-Haul trailers so much that it actually made sense for me to go buy my own trailer, which I ultimately did. I ultimately purchased my own trailer, and it made sense to do that. But generally speaking, if you're buying one or two, maybe you have a project car, you need to move it every now and then, doesn't make sense to go spend all the money on a car hauler and buy that. And you probably rent from U-Haul. And U-Haul has introduced their new flatbed trailer to replace the old one. And you may be very familiar with the old one if you are like me. You've used a lot of them. And it's designed, they say, to accommodate larger and heavier loads than the predecessor. And it's got a load capacity of 6,834 pounds, which is up from 5,290, which was the previous one, by the way. It has according to this, it's got a full width flat deck, which measures 8 feet 2 inches wide. And that eliminates one of the things that really bugged me about the old U-Haul car hauler, which was the tracks. It had the traditional tire rail tracks built into it, which is really frustrating, especially, say, if you're buying something that's not a standard size. Maybe you're picking up a K car. We'll talk about those later. But it gets rid of that. It's got drive over fenders. So if you've got a much wider vehicle, like a giant, pickup truck, maybe you're trying to trailer an F-150 Raptor, you can drop that on there. Drive right over the fenders, not a problem. The trailer itself weighs 3,165 pounds. And get this, it comes in at a in-town rate of $89.95 per day, which is admittedly more expensive. You might remember the previous auto hauler was $54.99. So yes, there is a price increase, but these are, for one, they're all going to be brand new. They're all going to work great for years until everyone wears them out. And you get a lot more value for it. So, hey, we don't just talk about cars on this show. We talk about the means for you to do things with cars, like the new U-Haul toy hauler. I might just have to rent one and do a review of it. We'll see. Stay tuned. We're going to be back with Automotive ADHD right here.
車は愛だ。スカジーと最初に呼んだのは誰だ。スカイラインの走りにスーパーシルエットを見たのだろうか。
I know, the skyline is terrific.
シャープな走りに磨きをかけて最新型スカイライン登場。
Oh, did you notice, by the way, that was Paul Newman endorsing the R30 Skyline. Of course, you're listening to the Automotive ADHD show. I'm your host, Matt West, and I just got back from a week and a half in Japan, and I saw a lot of Skylines, by the way. Not R30s. They're a little rarer over there, it seems, but I saw R32s, plenty of R32s. R33s, I didn't run into any R34s, however, but I do know they are out there. But this is interesting. So Paul Newman, of course, is a well-known actor, and he starred in many, many, many movies from the 1950s all the way, for decades of films through the 80s, the 90s, into the early 2000s. He even had a cameo in the Cars movie, by the way. But he was also an acclaimed racing driver. Actor, racing driver. Where have we seen that before? Keanu Reeves, maybe? We've seen that there. Of course, having a successful acting career probably affords you the luxury of just deciding to be a professional race car driver, which, as I understand, is not cheap. That's very not cheap. But anyway, I think what's cool about that, and again, just a little bit of history there with that. That's the R30 Skyline. Now, you may know the phrase GTR. You know, we have in the United States right now the R35 GTR. They dropped the Skyline moniker from that, and for a long time, the GTR was the top trim version, essentially, of the Skyline. And you may have caught up on that as well with my interview with Tommy Bristol from the other week. He had his R32 rare imported Skyline stolen. Now you might say, oh, R32s aren't rare anymore. Yeah, we see them a lot now here in the States. A lot of people have brought them over. But when he imported his, it was one of the earlier ones to be brought into the States. And it was the Skyline GTR. And the Skyline, when you drop the GTR moniker, you go down in the trim levels, is a sporty sedan, but it's just an average sedan, essentially, over in Japan. And they've had various generations of these cars. The R30, the one Paul Newman was endorsing specifically, was the R30 Skyline. It debuted in 1981, and by 1981, that was already the 6th generation Skyline. Now, at this time, there was no GTR moniker. They had various other ones. The top tier one basically was the GTES Turbo, and you could even get a Paul Newman special edition, which included different signature decals of his signature, embroidered interior, nice trim, stuff like that. But it's basically the GTES Skyline. But I find it fascinating, his endorsement specifically. For the Japanese television commercials. There were a number of them, and in all of the ones he's in, he goes, Skyline, it's terrific. That's it. That's literally it. That's all he says. It's terrific. It's crazy to me because, if I got paid millions of dollars to endorse a product, I don't even care what the product is. It doesn't even have to be a car. And my only job is just to look at the camera and say, it's terrific. I wouldn't be doing this show. I wouldn't be doing this show. I wouldn't be doing anything. I'd just be doing that all the time, and that would be easy and fun. But anyway, so fun bit of history trivia for you right there. that Paul Newman endorsed the R30 Skyline, and on Japanese television, we never saw it here in the States. We never got that car here in the States, but Paul Newman did keep his own R30 Skyline, by the way. He had one and he liked it a lot. So anyway, there you go. That's the sort of history, completely unrelated to anything else on the show that you get here on the Automotive ADHD show. Now, I want to talk about K-cars for a little bit because I saw, for one, a bunch of them in Japan. Of course, Japan is the home of the K-car. Now, I don't want to confuse you if you're not familiar with the K-car. I know a lot of folks are, but in case you're not, I don't want to confuse you with the Chrysler K platform car, like the LeBaron and these different Chryslers of the 1980s that were called K-cars. And those were really pioneered by Lee Iacocca as an affordable way to make a bunch of cars and basically get Chrysler out of the hole that it was in. That's not these. These are completely unrelated. In English, they'd be spelled like K-E-I, I guess, would be the best way to do it. And what a K-car is, K-Jidosha in Japanese, it's got to have a small engine, 660 cc's or less. It's got to be less than 11 feet long. It's got to be less than 4.9 feet wide and under 6.6 feet tall. You might be saying those are weirdly specific numbers, but they were in this thing I didn't really understand called metric. It had like meters and centimeters. Pretty sure that's the communist system, so I switched this all into feet, which is the proper way to do it, though the numbers are not quite a round conversion here. Anyway, to have a K car in the United States, it's got to be more than 25 years old as well, just because we have a general blanket 25-year import rule on any foreign cars that were not originally sold in the U.S. market. Now, Oregon is the latest state to come out with a bill legalizing K cars. And you might be saying, but I've seen these K car things, these mini trucks and these little mini sports cars and mini SUVs and minivans. I've seen these things driving around all over the place. Well, the thing is, a lot of states haven't necessarily made a decision on are they legal or are they not. It's sort of a gray area in a lot of states where they haven't said that you couldn't bring them in, so you just bring them in. And of course, that's how it works, right? In the absence of a law saying you can't do it, the assumption is you can do it. The problem is with this that leaves it open to a lot of interpretation. Because you're going to get little old ladies at some DMV in, Iowa or wherever, right? And they're not going to know what the car is. And they're going to say, that's not a car. I'm not going to register it. Likewise, you might get another little old lady who just doesn't care at all and just wants to collect the registration fee so she can, go take her lunch break or something, right? So you're going to get some interpretation there. Not having a defined status on what these are leaves it up to interpretation. And some people have had issues registering them. Some people haven't. Meanwhile, entire agencies have come out suggesting that the U.S. government ban these cars. And the name of the big one that I'm thinking of is slipping my mind at the moment here on the air, but we'll add it in later on the video if you are watching on video. But they recommended that the U.S. government basically ban these. They were going state to state to state saying, hey, these cars are unsafe. We don't want them. So a lot of states started banning them, which resulted in a lot of pushback, especially because the bans weren't retroactive. If you already had them and you had registration on them, some places were even asking you to forfeit your registration. Hey, you can't register that, but I already did. Too bad. Give us the registration back. And we don't want that sort of thing. We don't like that here in America. That's not how we do business. And the argument that these are unsafe is, by the way, completely ridiculous in my opinion, because yes, they are technically unsafe compared to an American car, a modern car, but we also allow a lot of old classic cars on the road that are unsafe compared to modern cars. And then people say, well, yeah, but there's no crumple zones in these and they don't meet even safety regulations from American cars in the era that they were made. Yeah, well, neither does a motorcycle. Motorcycles don't do that. Well, these cars are slow, though, and they can't get out of their own way like a motorcycle can. Motorcycles are fast. Yes, and we allow 50cc Vespas on the roads, scooters. We allow plenty of them on the roads. So the argument that they're unsafe, I think, is ridiculous because we have plenty of other unsafe vehicles, unsafe air quotes, in this same fashion. And you as an American should be able to decide if you want to drive it. And for one, this K car being slightly unsafe compared to a, brand new F-150 is completely your decision to drive it, in my opinion, too. The state shouldn't be telling you that, hey, you can't drive that, because it's only unsafe to you. Again, like a motorcycle, it's only unsafe to you. And then the argument is, oh, well, they can't, do freeway speeds. Well, yeah, they might not do 85. Plenty of these things will do 75. It's pushing it. But even some of the sporty ones, there's K sports cars. They'll do 75. They'll do even more than that. So the arguments against these are just baseless. And I think that the organizations that have been pushing these arguments and trying to get states to ban these things, I think have been lobbied in one way or another by small equipment manufacturers, maybe Polaris with the side-by-sides, because you could go spend $20,000 on a fancy Polaris side-by-side to use on your small ranch, your farm, your business, whatever, off of the road, but something as a small little pickup truck type thing. Or you could go spend like $3,000 on a K car and spend another $2,500 on a little, on importing like a little K truck that actually, by the way, these K trucks, the beds in these things, oftentimes are larger and still have more space than trucks like my Tacoma, for example. In fact, many, Jim Miller Suzuki Carry, has a bigger bed and cargo space than my Toyota Tacoma. Let's put that into perspective. So the latest state, all of this is to give you some context, because the latest state to actually come out in approval of K cars is now Oregon. Colorado, we did it very recently, in fact, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. But Oregon is now saying that they want to do this. They proposed a bill. The bill has yet to pass. It's Senate Bill 1213. And I'm bringing this up because it's just another one that we got to get K cars legal everywhere, in places where either A, they're not legal, or B, where they're in that legal gray area that you sort of just have like a 50-50 when you go to try to register it. Like, will they register it? Will they not? So again, Oregon Senate Bill 1213, and it registration, by the way, $63. That's not bad. And it says there are some restrictions. They say they're only allowed on public roads with speed limits of 65 miles per hour or less. And they say if you use it on like a freeway, 75 miles an hour, or anything over that 65, technically, it'd be $1,000, up to $1,000 fine, which I don't think they're ever going to actually do that. But anyway, so there are a number of states that do have K cars legalized. Colorado, again, like I said, we're the most recent, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, I think. Texas is also legal there, and the states that that don't have legal K trucks, I think really should, because again, as Americans, we should be able to have the freedom to buy and use things that work for our lifestyle. And you might say, well, these K car things sound really niche. Well, they are. They are very niche. They are very unusual, especially in the American market. But for a great deal of people, they're more than just a weird car you can buy for kind of cheap. They're very useful for their job, their work, their ranch, whatever. So we need to keep this up. We need to keep these legal. We're going to be right back. You're listening to the Automotive ADHD show. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about something that really grinds my gears.
This is Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
Devin doing his job to keep those car sounds rolling on the show. LS swapped Volvo 240 wagon. He's sent in a number of car sounds over the years, in fact, and he's had a number of, LS swapped 240s now. So his latest one is a wagon. So, and it sounds great. It's fantastic. Send your car sounds into my show, facebook.com/Automotive ADHD. Get them featured here on the show. Before the break, I was talking about K cars and how Oregon is now the most recent state to provide legislation to legalize them. Again, the bill still needs to be passed. And I bring that up, even though this show happens in Colorado, because a lot of listeners on the podcast are actually in Oregon. So if you're on the podcast, if you're watching this online, you need to let your reps know that Senate Bill 1213 to legalize K cars should be a yes. Get that signed into law. Let your representatives know that they need to pass it. Let your governor know that he needs to sign it. So we need to make that happen. And we got 50 states. We gotta go through one at a time, but we can do it. Unless we can get a federal mandate on this, which I think would be incredible, though right now I think it would be challenging just because of all the things going on federally. This would probably be on the federal level a very low priority as far as things go, but not impossible. Never say it's impossible. So, but I did want to touch on, before we talk about something that really bugs me, that a friend of mine brought up, in fact, and that is that, and we'll get to it. We'll get to it. It's something that's really dangerous. I see it on the roads almost once a day now, sometimes multiple times a day, but we'll get to that. But I did want to touch on Colorado's status with the K cars. We've covered it before in the past, and there was actually, for a brief moment of time, there was going to be a ban on it, and there was so much backlash to the state reps and everyone involved that they pulled back on it. They actually pulled back on it. And not only did they pull back on it after that, some state reps introduced a bill, and that bill passed, and then the governor signed it. And I don't want to, here's the thing with our governor here in Colorado. His name is Governor Polis. Of course, if you live here, you do know that. But for the benefit of my listeners on the podcast elsewhere, Governor Polis came out and signed it on May 9th, so not all that long ago. Did a video, actually. He did this social media campaign with it. Him signing the bill, there's K-trucks behind him, a cool, like, giant Colorado license plate that said K-Law. Like, it was cool, right? And I appreciate, am I going to say I appreciate something from Governor Polis? I am, because that is a win in the automotive world. That is a win for us weird enthusiasts. And maybe even if you're not an enthusiast and you need something affordable, small, light on fuel, but with a good cargo capacity, you need it for your business to drive around town, do deliveries with. There are so many cool reasons to use a K-truck that aren't just in the automotive enthusiast space like I am. I get my head so far into that enthusiast space, I forget that there's people who just, drive their car to work. But even these could be really useful for a lot of people. But having said that, that law legally, actually, it goes into effect July 1st, 2027. So there is actually a bit of a buffer time between now and 2027. Now, what's the status on registering those vehicles? We shall see, because again, it's in a little bit of a legal gray area. They've said that they want to allow it now. Your mileage may vary if you go to the DMV and try to register your K-truck. The registration, they say officially, though, under the law, goes into effect, this hurts a little bit, January 1st, 2028. Yes, 3 years. Technically a little less than 3, but 3 years from now is when that law goes into effect. And again, the requirements for it are fairly similar to the Oregon one I talked about. Must be at least 25 years old. The vehicle should be 25 years old, and it's got to meet all the regular requirements. But our speed cap here in Colorado is a little bit lower. Can't be driven on roads over 55 miles per hour. So anyway, they also implemented a emissions testing requirement for them. They say that uses a static 2-speed idle test, which is standard for old classic vehicles, basically. And it must meet the original manufacturing year requirements. So there are some caveats to it. But I will say that, I wouldn't let this lull you into believing that Governor Polis is pro-car guy, pro-car anything. Okay, for one, I really don't, because he has demonstrated. I praise him for signing this bill. Though I do believe this bill is merely a diversion from many other things going on at the state capitol. But he has been very anti-car in the past. I don't know if you remember back when he signed a gas and transportation fee. You're listening on radio. You can't see my air quotes. Fee. It is a tax. He signed it into law. It was a bill creating a new fee structure. And he signed it into law. And by the way, this gas and transportation fee tax included a tax on actually gasoline, but it also included a tax on deliveries, things like Grubhub and Amazon and Uber Eats and FedEx, like all this stuff got this little tax. And it's a small tax. But just because it's small doesn't mean that it's morally okay. The fact is that this, when he signed it to raise your gas prices, when he signed that, this was a few years ago, and we've all kind of forgotten about it. We haven't forgotten about it here, but when he did that, he was completely bypassing your rights as a citizen of the state under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which requires additional taxes to be voted on by the public. They completely bypassed this year. There was a bunch of pushback against it. Unfortunately, unsuccessful pushback, but there was a lot of pushback against it purely on the merits of it violating the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So, and bear in mind, he pushed that through. He also has only begun, there's some grammar, he has only begun to actually crack down on the state's automotive theft issue. Why? I want to know, why has it taken so long for him to address this issue? Now he's coming out with some, new plans and policies and signing new legislation that's making it more challenging for thieves, to steal cars. It's upping the, penalties and the prosecution and all of that. Well, why are we doing that now? He's coming out now looking like the hero, like, look what we're doing to correct car theft. Yes, but he didn't just get sworn into office. He's been in office for years and years at this point. So why is he only now addressing the car theft? Why? Why is that? I really want to know. I really want to know. Because if you're not familiar, Colorado, up until this year, was the #1 state in the nation for car theft. We covered that heavily on this show. We even had a couple of years ago, a sheriff who's a sheriff specifically from Custer County, who is the head of the Colorado Auto Theft Prevention Authority. Well, not the head, but he's the head law enforcement officer in this capacity. And he talked about that and how big of an issue it is. So why is the governor only now addressing that? Because all of the auto theft problems that have happened under his watch. So anyway, he gets to look like the good guy now, fixing the problem, even though arguably the problem happened under his watch and he did nothing for years. So anyway, I think it's a good step. I absolutely do. I think bringing K cars into legalization should be a 50-state thing. We need to advocate for that. And again, if you're like, I just care about muscle cars, man, why are we talking about these stupid little Japanese cars? It's because it's a moral thing too. Even if this is not a car that appeals to you, I think this is a moral thing. This is a thing that the government shouldn't be preventing us from doing this. It's a freedom and liberty thing, really. I should be able to go buy this little K car and drive it around. And I can buy a motorcycle, I can buy a moped, I can buy a lot of stuff that is technically a heck of a lot less safe, but oh no, these K trucks are too unsafe for the roadways. Give me a break. So anyway, coming up after the break, oh man, I'm fired up now. We got to talk about headlights. There's a problem with headlights. That's coming up right here. You're listening to the Automotive ADHD show. Maybe you're catching it on the radio. Maybe you're catching it as a podcast. We'll be right back in just a minute.
He's the nut behind the wheel and behind the mic. This is Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
Come to Japan, they said. You'll be surrounded by your JDM dream cars, Chasers, Supras, S14s. No, I came here and I'm just surrounded by these weird-looking Miatas. I don't know what I did wrong.
Has anyone figured out what exactly those are? I'm still working on it. I'm not sure. I think it's a Miata. It's weird. It's convertible. It's rear-wheel drive. And there was this old Japanese guy who came up to me while I was in Japan, and I was trying to figure out what's weird about these JDM Miatas. And he said, oh, they actually have this special engine that has a variable valve lift system. So like the camshaft actually has like variable lobes on it. It's like mind-blowing. He called it V something. I can't remember, honestly. But anyway, if you know what that is, let me know, facebook.com/automotive ADHD. And if you don't know what I'm talking about on the radio, go check out the video of this show on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify. Yes, Spotify has video. It does have video now. I bet you didn't know that. You would know that, though, if you were watching this show on Spotify right now. You may know that. But anyway, I'm your host, Matt West, talking cars, and I wanted to give you more of a recap of my Japan trip, and there is so much to talk about. So much interesting automotive stuff I got to see, and I want to talk about this, but I got to get to another point first, and I think I'm going to run myself out of time. I'm looking at the show clock already. I'm going to run out of time to get to this, so we're going to save it for next week. I know I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger. There's so much cool stuff in Japan. Even got to learn some fascinating Toyota history that I didn't even know. As a guy who's owned a lot of old Toyotas, I didn't even know this. Not only that, I got to tour the very first ever Toyota factory. Yeah, it was cool. So we're not going to get to any of that today, though, okay? I'm just teasing that up, all right? Because my buddy Tirso, he messaged me, actually while I was in Japan. I was on my way back, and he messaged me, and he said, I got to talk about something. There's a big problem on the roadways. Have you noticed it? And that is people driving around with their headlights off. Daytime running lights on, headlights off. That's fine if it's daytime. But they're doing this at night. And oh man, he mentioned this to me and I went, man, you're right. I see that all the time. And by the way, Tirso, he's a great dude. I've never had him on the show, and I really should bring him on the show. He's been begging me to bring him on the show for years, and we need to make this happen here. But he's the guy at the intro of the show, the guy yelling, "We were in there!" That one, right at the very intro of the show. I know you've heard it. That's Tirso in his drift car, his IS300 drift car, which he's doing some very cool 2JZ spoolie boy turbo stuff on it right now. So Tirso, I'm looking forward to that. But I got to talk about this though, because, and I guarantee you've seen this. If you're listening on the radio, you may look around even now. This show, of course, airs at 9 a.m. on AM 1460, The Answer, but it re-airs throughout the weekend as well, and even into the evening on some other stations. So you may actually look around and find this if you're driving around right now and it's nighttime. And so the problem is people driving around with their daytime running lights on, right? That's a problem. Why is that a problem? Well, for one, it's unsafe. It is super unsafe, because here's the thing. When your daytime running lights are on and nothing else, that means that your taillights are not illuminated. You ever come across a car on the highway, you're driving at night, back of the car is dark. You can't even hardly see the thing until you're right up on it. And thank God these cars have reflectors on them. Like, thank God reflectors are actually mandated on some of these cars, because that's been the only way I've spotted these guys with a reasonable distance to slow down or avoid them, because my headlights are hitting the reflectors on the back of the car because the taillights are completely dark. And the thing is, you will notice these are always new cars. Why is it always new cars? It's not some old jalopy. It's not some crusty old Corolla. No, it's always new cars. And you're probably thinking to yourself, you already know the reason, and you're probably right. It's, for one, because these new cars are full of screens on the interior. So you get in your old car, right? Get in my 1986 AE86. Get in my S2000, which people are telling me is an old car now. Actually, they're telling me it's a weird Miata. I forgot. Yeah, that's right. It's a weird Miata. But anyway, so get in either of those cars and try to drive at night. And the problem you will find is that the interior illumination, the gauge cluster and all this stuff isn't illuminated. The S2000's a little different, and I'll explain that in a bit. But you get in my AE86 and drive it. Not that you could right now because it doesn't run. But say it did. And you get in at night and drive it without the headlights. You are not going to be able to see the gauge cluster at all. It is completely dark. It is completely unilluminated. You will see nothing. You will notice it the very second. Well, for one, if you're driving in any place that doesn't have streetlights, you'll notice it because you just can't see in general. But in the cities now, everything is so well illuminated at night. It's hard to say that, well, it's easier to make a mistake here. And but you get in and you won't be able to read the instruments. All right. That's your instruments, as if it's an airplane, the speedometer and stuff. You won't be able to read that, and that's going to be a dead giveaway. You get into a new car, and it has a screen-based gauge cluster. It has a big screen in the center console area, and it's all well illuminated. In fact, it's over-illuminated, and there's oftentimes a reason for that. My S2000 is a good example. My S2000 has a digital gauge cluster, and for being a 2001 model, it has a digital gauge cluster, kind of more of an old school LCD look to it. You know, it looks like calculator numbers on it, kind of. And what you will notice when you get in that car is that gauge cluster is obnoxiously bright. If you try to drive with the headlights off, the cluster's bright because when the headlights are off, the car, it doesn't have any sensors to know when it's light out. It's too old for that. The car assumes that the headlights are off, therefore it must be daytime, therefore you must have direct sunlight on the screen. So it makes that screen, it cranks that brightness up all the way because in direct sunlight, you need that to still have the LCD be legible. So if you get in at night, try to drive without your headlights, that screen is obnoxiously bright. Not only that, your backlighting on things like your HVAC, that'll still be off. That won't be on. In these modern cars, they have a compound problem. For one, they have screens in the center cluster, the gauge cluster area. They have screens in the center stack. But those screens oftentimes are automatically illuminated based off of a light sensor. Case in point, my 2024 WRX. It has an analog tachometer and an analog speedometer, but it's got a screen between them, and it's got a screen in the center stack. I've told you how I feel about that screen in the center stack. I hate it. I want my climate control buttons back. I want them to be physical. Anyway, the thing is, what it will do, if I turn the daytime running lights on, so I go to daytime running lights position, well, it'll light up the daytime running lights in the front, but not the main headlights, so it's not projecting light as far. And then at night, it will automatically adjust the brightness of the gauge cluster and the screens because it has a light sensor. It'll adjust that from being really bright. Those will be bright during the daytime, just like my old S2000. Well, at night, it'll bring them down so they're not totally shining in your face, blinding you. But the problem is it will do that regardless of the headlight position switch. So you can have your headlights off, you can have your headlights in daytime running light position, or they can be on. It doesn't matter. The gauge cluster brightness is set based on a light sensor. So that means you could have the daytime running lights on. The gauges are just as lit as they would be if the headlights were on. It doesn't matter. And they're not blowing your eyes up. They're not flashing you really bright because the light sensor has said, oh, it's nighttime. I'm going to dim the brightness on these. The backlight will still be on, but I'm going to dim it a little bit. This is a huge problem. This is why we have cars. You see it. Drive around tomorrow night, tonight, whatever. It doesn't matter. You will see a car driving through the city with just the daytime running lights on, the headlights off, and the driver's oblivious. And the thing I hate too is I see these people and I try to flash them, say, hey, your headlights are off. And they just look at me. Sometimes they even give me the middle finger. They're like, why are you flashing me, bro? Because your headlights are off. Learn how to use your car first, then drive safe. That is an important part of this. You've got to actually have those headlights on. And this drives me nuts, and I can't understand why manufacturers have done this auto-dimming stuff now. It's terrible. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Automotive ADHD Show. We'll talk to you next week, right here.